Leon the Professional is my favorite film. Wait, hold on. Before you write clickbait in the comments and move on to the next video, it's my favorite film, and I also think it's possible that it's a bad film. Let me start by giving you my history with it. When I was younger, I regarded it as one of my favorite films. Not sure exactly where it would have ranked on my all-time list, but it'd definitely be high up there, although not at the top. I'd probably seen it at least half a dozen times. But as I got older, I generally dedicated less time to rewatching films I'd already seen in favor of new ones. Until about a month ago, I hadn't watched Leon in probably 15 years. Lately, I've been making a point to go back and rewatch films I love but hadn't seen in a long time, and Leon quickly made its way to the top of that list. I wasn't expecting much in the way of a profound experience from the film. I remember it being a great, intense action movie with some excellent performances and smart, stylish filmmaking from writer-director Luc Besson. I definitely remember it having pretty graphic violence and some controversy regarding the relationship between the two leads, one of whom is a man in his 40s and the other a 12-year-old girl. That said, I don't remember it being an especially deep film. It is what it appears to be, or so I thought. Upon rewatching, I was thrown for a bit of a loop. It wasn't really a different film from what I remember. It has intense action, great performances, and stylish directing. However, I found myself having an extremely difficult time connecting with the relationship at the center of the film. There were elements that felt just wrong. And not just the controversy about the ages of the characters. That always felt weird. But now I was looking at so many sequences that I never really thought too much about in the past, and seeing them in a different light, and not a positive one. I came away from my initial rewatch with the impression that I didn't enjoy it nearly as much as I expected I would. I remembered it being a little tonally inconsistent, but it seemed far more prevalent now than it used to be, and it affected my enjoyment more than it used to. The more I thought about it, the more I remembered just how many of these moments there are in the film. I decided I wanted to take another look at some of these scenes, see if I could figure out why the filmmakers would choose to make the decisions they did. This led me down a rabbit hole unlike any I've ever experienced with a film. Ultimately, it's left me almost completely convinced it's the most brilliant film I've ever seen, but still with a shred of doubt in my mind that it could also be a bad film that I'm just reading way too much into. Before I get into the details of my experience, I want to talk a little bit about subtext in films. Subtext is little details in a film that can be used to convey some alternate meaning than the surface interpretation. For example, I don't think many people watch Stanley Kubrick's The Shining and come away thinking it's exclusively a movie about ghosts making Jack Nicholson try to murder his family. We think there's more going on because the film is filled with hints intentionally placed by the filmmakers to give us that impression. Then, it's our job to put the pieces together and discover what we believe to be the meaning behind those hints. There are forums, YouTube videos, books, even feature-length films about all the different theories on what The Shining is really about. There are even theories reaching beyond the fictional narrative of the film, like that Kubrick was intentionally dropping hints to indicate his involvement in the US government faking the moon landing. We're not going to get that deep with Leon, fortunately, but you have to understand that many conversations about subtext often sound like conspiracy theories, because they are, by nature, an over-analysis of something that can much more easily be accepted at face value. Subtext can be used to convey all sorts of ideas that could be related to the surface text of the film, unrelated, or even directly contradictory. A great example of this is Paul Verhoeven's Starship Troopers. On its face, we have a fun, gory, kinda cheesy sci-fi action flick about space marines flying to an alien world to fight giant bugs after they throw an asteroid at Earth. Beneath that, however, is a biting commentary on militarism, nationalism, fascism, and propaganda. The subtext of the film is actually a criticism of the surface text. It's well-concealed satire. It is itself a terrific example of the very ideas the filmmakers intend to undermine. This is the closest comparison I can think of to Leon. It's not one-to-one. Leon is not a comedic satire by any interpretation. But I do believe it contains subtext intended by the filmmakers to undermine and subvert the themes and ideas presented on the surface. So what are the surface themes and ideas presented in Leon? Leon is a film about the character of Matilda Lando, played by Natalie Portman. Matilda is a young girl who gets caught up in a deadly game of cat and mouse with a group of crooked cops, led by Stansfield, played by Gary Oldman. Matilda's father is holding drugs for Stansfield, and when some of those drugs go missing, Stansfield brutally murders him, along with the rest of Matilda's family. Knowing that Stansfield will likely be coming for her next, Matilda seeks refuge with her neighbor Leon, played by Jean Reno, who she discovers is a professional assassin. Leon leans heavily into themes of revenge, father-daughter bonding, companionship, and the line between platonic love and forbidden romance. That's probably pretty close to the description you'll get when reading reviews of the film. I read quite a few, and couldn't find any that significantly stray from this generalized interpretation. It's my assertion, however, that this is not an accurate picture of what's truly being presented by the film's narrative. When analyzed through the lens of subtextual evidence, which I will provide to you in this video, the film not only conveys an entirely different thematic experience, but also dramatically changes the perceived plot itself, and the characters within it. The centerpiece of the film is the relationship between the two leads, Matilda and Leon. In order to understand what the film is about, it's critical for us to understand this relationship. Surface analyses put a paternal bond at the forefront. Matilda finds in Leon the father figure her real father failed to be, while Leon finds in Matilda the love for a daughter he never knew he was missing. The strongest evidence I can find to support this interpretation is simply their ages. Matilda is a child, while Leon is a middle-aged man. It's such a natural connection to make any time we see a developing relationship between these age groups, so long as that relationship isn't abusive. The problem is, the relationship is abusive, and the abuse is not hidden in subtext. It's outright presented openly in multiple scenes that don't seem to have any other sensible meaning. So why is it that so many seem to overlook something so blatant and so critical to the relationship at the center of this story? Well, it's because the abuser is Matilda. Now, let me preface this section by assuring you that I fully understand how that sounds. Accusing a 12-year-old girl of abuse in her relationship with a man in his 40s sounds insane, at best, and I don't even want to mention how it sounds at worst. I want to state in no uncertain terms that I'm only commenting on the relationship between these two fictional characters. I don't believe this relationship is something that would, or even could, translate to the real world. But the film creates circumstances where this dynamic is possible, in the way that it treats the characters of Matilda and Leon. Leon is not a normal adult, and Matilda is definitively not a normal child. In fact, from a psychological standpoint, which is how Matilda's abuse manifests, the film goes out of its way to hammer home the idea that Matilda is the adult, while Leon is the child.
Finish growing up, Leon. I just get older.
For me, it's the opposite. I'm old enough. I need time to grow up.
This idea is present in nearly every scene the pair share together. Matilda absolutely dominates the relationship. She decides what they do and when they do it. She directs conversations and pushes them into areas he's uncomfortable with. She even manipulates his perception itself as a means to exert more control over his actions. The only time she relinquishes control to Leon is when he's doing what he does best, killing people, or teaching her how to kill people, which is her desired goal, not his. For us to accept the dynamic of this relationship, Leon's character needs to be quite, shall we say, special. It's never directly addressed as to what his mental state is, but there are several details which imply some significant cognitive limitations. Most obviously are his simplistic speech patterns, and the fact that he can't read. In a vacuum, these alone would be enough to draw clear conclusions. But the film also obscures the importance of these details by making English a second language for Leon. Maybe he can read French, but just never learned to read English. The film doesn't specify. Maybe it's just his understanding of the language that's limited, rather than his ability to speak and understand in general. The film doesn't specify. There are also some more subtle details. Him drinking milk all the time, the childlike joy he expresses when viewing classic cinema, his personification of a houseplant as his best friend. These could be discarded as mere eccentricities, but they do appear to add some degree of infantilization to his character. The strongest evidence to suggest Leon may be well below normal intelligence is in how he interacts with Matilda herself. There's an appropriate way for an adult to respond upon being told by a child that they want to be a professional assassin. That way is, well, actually, I'll just let old Tony say it for me.
Can't I get a job instead?
A job? What the hell can you do?
I can clean.
I ain't got no work for a 12-year-old kid, so get it out of your goddamn head. It's over!
Yeah, that seems about right. Now, let's take a look at how Leon responds the first time Matilda broaches the subject with him.
How about this? I work for you, and in exchange, you teach me how to clean. Is it a deal?
No, it's not a deal.
Not exactly the same energy there, is it? He says no, but doesn't do so forcefully. Where Tony slams the door shut immediately, Leon leaves it wide open for further negotiation. Matilda, of course, doesn't leave it alone. Let's see how he reacts when she pushes him a little harder.
I've decided what to do with my life. I want to be a cleaner.
You want to be a cleaner? Here. Take it. It's a goodbye gift. Go clean. But not with me. I work alone. Understand? Alone.
This is possibly the worst way he could respond if his goal is to get her to stop pestering him. He accepts the notion that it's okay for her to do this, so long as he's not involved. From there, it's just a matter of convincing him that he has a responsibility to help and protect her, which is precisely what she does.
Matilda, why are you doing this to me? I've been nothing but nice to you. I even saved your life yesterday, right outside the door.
Right. So now you're responsible for it. If you saved my life, you must have saved it for a good reason. If you throw me out now, it's like you never opened your door. Like you let me die right there in front of it. But you did open it. So,
Matilda.
if you don't help me, I'll die tonight. I can feel it. And I don't want to die tonight.
Oh, and also, he hands a loaded gun to a 12-year-old.
How's that?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that Leon isn't exactly playing with a full deck here. Leon's intelligence isn't the only matter that needs to be addressed. We also need to understand Matilda's intelligence. She's clearly smarter than an average 12-year-old, but just how smart is she? I'd argue she's extremely smart. Genius territory. In particular, she is a master manipulator, even by adult standards. Children are obviously capable of manipulating adults, but their manipulation is usually limited, simple, childlike. A hungry child whines until they're fed. An injured child cries until they're helped. An angry child screams or pouts when they don't get their way. It's transparent. Adults have no trouble recognizing this type of manipulation, and only allow our actions to be controlled by it because of our natural instinct to care for children. We want children to be safe, and comfortable, and happy, so when they inform us that they aren't, we're inclined to fulfill whatever it is they're requesting of us. We don't generally tolerate this type of simplistic manipulation from adults. Adults are supposed to be capable of satisfying their own needs, and childish whining and tantrums come off as pathetic. Adults have to develop more sophisticated methods of manipulating other adults, where they can maintain a degree of dignity in the eyes of their target, while still successfully influencing their actions. One of the best ways to do this is to conceal the manipulation itself. If the target doesn't know they're being manipulated, their defenses drop. They think they're acting purely based on their own interpretation of the situation, when in actuality, the situation itself has been altered for the express purpose of producing actions to benefit the manipulator. This type of manipulation requires careful planning and consideration of not only one's own actions, but how others will perceive and react to those actions. There are multiple instances of Matilda engaging in this type of concealed manipulation. One of the most convincing is... hold on, let me check my notes. Yes, her first scene in the film. This scene is incredibly fascinating. Her manipulation is so well hidden that not only does Leon not notice, the audience doesn't either. It's almost completely invisible unless you're specifically looking for it, but when you do see it, there's basically no alternative way to interpret her actions. The scene begins with Matilda sitting above the stairs in her apartment building, smoking a cigarette. Leon enters below and begins making his way up the stairs. She notices him and sets the cigarette down next to her. An apparent attempt to hide it from Leon. He continues up the stairs. She watches him the whole way. He doesn't seem to notice anything, and continues past her towards his apartment. It looks like she successfully hid the cigarette from him. Or he just doesn't care. Either way, she got what she wanted. Right? Wrong.
Hi.
She stops him after he walks past her onto the side where, when he turns to look at her, he'll see where she placed the cigarette. What explanation is there for this sequence of actions? If she didn't want him to see the cigarette, why did she stop him precisely at the moment when he would be most likely to notice it? If she didn't care about him seeing the cigarette, why'd she bother hiding it in the first place? The only conclusion is that she wanted him to notice that she was hiding the cigarette. She's not concealing the cigarette. She's concealing her manipulation of the situation. She doesn't want to just tell him what's on her mind. She wants Leon to bring up the topic himself, as though she didn't have anything to do with it. And of course, he takes the bait.
Why did you hide a cigarette?
So what does this scene tell us about Matilda's character? On its own, not a whole lot. There doesn't seem to be any sinister intent behind this manipulation. The scene isn't really about a cigarette. That's just the introduction to a brief discussion about Matilda being physically abused by her father. She doesn't directly state that either, but drops some pretty heavy-handed hints to Leon. Again, this is not an impeachable action. If she's being abused by her father, it's good that she's informing other adults, regardless of the methods she uses to do that. What it does demonstrate is her keen understanding of the value of making people think about something without them knowing she's doing it. shows that she's capable of advanced manipulation tactics that normal children are not. Throughout the film, she uses this tactic, and others, to manipulate Leon in a number of ways. Unfortunately for Leon, many of the other reasons for her manipulation are nowhere near as innocent as this interaction. There's one scene in particular that, I believe, is by far the most important in the film. Interestingly, in my perusal of reviews and breakdowns, it was exceedingly rare for anyone to even mention it. It's not like the cigarette scene, deriving its importance from barely noticeable details. It's not subtle. It's completely open and clear about what's happening. The consequences of the scene inform everything that happens in the film after it, and it's extremely dramatic and memorable. Yet, when people think about the film and try to recall the most important moments, they mostly ignore it. The scene takes place after Matilda has already convinced Leon to train her as an assassin. But she isn't satisfied yet. She wants revenge on the men responsible for her family's murder. It's preceded by one in which she returns to her family's apartment. She sees the chalk outline where her little brother died. Then, she opens a spot in the floorboards where it appears her father had money stashed, and takes it. The scene begins as Leon exits the bathroom. Matilda pours a glass of milk, beckoning him to sit. Leon obliges. And Matilda offers him the money she took from the apartment in a request to contract him to kill Stansfield. Leon refuses.
I'm not taking it.
Why not?
Too heavy.
This
is when she turns to manipulation. First is guilting him.
Why are you so mean to me? You're out there killing people you don't give a shit about. You won't get the bastards who killed my whole family.
Leon resists, giving a little bit of good advice regarding the emptiness of revenge in his own simplistic way.
Revenge is not good, Matilda. Believe. It's better to forget.
Matilda doesn't accept this, and gets much more intense.
To forget? After I've seen the outline of my brother's body on the floor, you expect me to forget? I want to kill those sons of bitches. I'm gonna blow their fucking heads off.
She even uses her dead brother as a prop to assist in her manipulation. Something a truly grief-stricken person would never even think to do.
Nothing's the same after you've killed someone. Your life is changed forever. You'll have to sleep with one eye open for the rest of your life.
More good advice from Leon. Still, Matilda doesn't relent.
I don't give a shit about sleeping, Leon. I want love. Or death. That's it.
This is an incredibly important line. It's Matilda truthfully stating her mindset. She is obsessed with love and death. They're related in her mind, even interchangeable. She's about to demonstrate that as she uses both as a means to convince Leon to do her bidding.
Love or death? Get off my case, Matilda. I'm tired of your games.
Leon scoffs at the notion, dismissing it as a childish game. He has no idea what he's dealing with. I'm going to let the rest of the scene play, uninterrupted.
It's a really great game, Leon. Makes people nicer. Starts them thinking. It's the kind of game you love. If I keep me with you for life.
And if you lose?
Go shopping alone, like before.
You're gonna lose, Matilda. There's a round in the chamber. I heard it.
So what? It's up to you if I end up with a bullet in the head, huh?
Nothing.
I hope you're not lying, Leon. I really hope that deep down inside there's no love in you. Because if there is, just a little bit of love in you for me. I think that in a few minutes you'll regret you never said anything. I love you, Leon. I win.
What Matilda does in this scene is, unequivocally, emotional abuse. She threatens to do something completely unhinged, unreasonable, and violent. Tells Leon that if he doesn't stop her, it will be his fault. She creates a circumstance that doesn't have anything to do with him, then makes him responsible for the outcome. This is the same as a physically abusive husband who beats his wife, then emotionally abuses her by gaslighting about how she made him do it. Obviously, Matilda isn't capable of physically abusing Leon, but she plays the emotional abuse to a T. This is the most important scene in the film, not only because it reveals Matilda for what she truly is, but also because it breaks down the last of Leon's resistance to her. From this point forward, she's in complete control of him. When she chooses to exert that control, he bends to her will with little to no pushback. Everything that happens for the remainder of the film is the direct result of Matilda's actions. She creates every conflict, constructs the circumstances leading to said conflict, and is the only character who ultimately benefits from them. Looking at the rest of the film through the lens of the information we gain in this scene, before and after it actually happens, reveals literally dozens of instances where we can clearly see Matilda plotting, analyzing, judging, controlling, dominating, and manipulating Leon in numerous ways. I've spent far more hours than I should, picking through the film scene by scene, and still continue to find new details to support this narrative. While I would love to go through them and point out everything I found, that would make an already very long video completely inaccessible. I encourage you to go back and rewatch the film while keeping an eye out for these behaviors. I have no doubt you will be positively shocked at how prevalent they are once you know to look for them. Before we continue to the next topic, and there is definitely more to talk about with this film, I would like to review one more scene relating to Matilda's treatment of Leon. It's the one where they're in a fancy restaurant, eating a meal and drinking champagne together, celebrating the completion of Matilda's first assassination job. Matilda is drinking, and it's clearly starting to affect her. She starts to get more rowdy and aggressive. She tries to kiss him. He's embarrassed and shyly asks her to stop. She doesn't press the subject further. She pours more champagne and quickly gulps it down. Then she starts laughing. and keeps laughing, and keeps laughing. I timed it. She laughs for 34 consecutive seconds. No breaks, nothing else happening, just Matilda laughing. This is such an interesting scene because of how much its context changes based on your interpretation of the film. Standard interpretation would make this scene lighthearted, sort of comedic relief to break up the more intense training sequences. But viewed in the context of Matilda exerting control and domination over Leon, it becomes amazingly dark and sinister. Before I discovered this alternate interpretation, I always thought something seemed a little off about Natalie Portman's performance in it. The obvious explanation for her laughter is that she's drunk, but it's not a silly, tipsy, giggly kind of laugh that people do when they start to get drunk. She seems oddly focused while she's laughing, and her focus is on Leon. First time I watched the scene after I started looking for things to support my alternative reading of the film, I watched her laugh for about 20 seconds before I realized what's happening. Matilda is laughing at Leon. She's mocking him, totally overwhelmed with amusement at the ridiculousness of his weakness and embarrassment. It's like she's laughing at how easily she's able to so thoroughly outsmart and control him. Oh, and the last thing she says right before she guzzles the champagne is,
Beat ya.
I paused around this point and just thought a minute about how sinister and cruel the tone of this scene is now. Then I hit play, and this happens. She points at him and continues laughing, as if to remove all doubt about what she's laughing at. It's confirmed. How could I have missed it every time? If I was going to take a single frame to best represent the film, something to put on the poster to show what it's really about, it'd be this shot. A gleeful Matilda pointing, laughing in the face of an embarrassed, dejected Leon. Anyway, if you're hoping we got all the darkest elements hidden in this film out of the way, I'm afraid I have some bad news for you. There's another theory I came up with about events that, if true, moves Matilda's character even deeper into the realm of psychopathy. I say if because I can't prove this theory. I scanned every relevant scene looking for some way to do so, but couldn't find one. It's left a mystery from a factual standpoint. Although I do have reasons to believe it is most likely an intended interpretation. It pertains to the event that sets in motion the entire film. It's something that we don't see happen on screen, but it's discussed openly, and we're never told who is responsible. I'm speaking about who stole the dope that Matilda's father was holding for Stansfield. The first time we hear about this is right after the scene with Matilda smoking above the stairwell. Matilda's father exits his apartment, along with Stansfield and his partner. He's being interrogated by the partner about the missing dope. The partner logically suspects him of having stolen it, while he pleads his innocence and ignorance.
I mean, what's my job? I'm just a holder. I hold the stuff just like you give it to me. I don't look at it. I don't touch it. I don't even know how to cut it.
Try and follow me, all right? In June, we gave you the dope. It tests 100% pure. Now it's July. We pick up the dope, and it tests 90% pure. Now, somewhere between June and July, 10% turn to copper.
The partner is correct. Matilda's dad is easily the most likely suspect. He has the most means, motivation, and opportunity to do it of anyone, by far. He doesn't sound like he's lying when he claims not to know what happened, but that alone isn't nearly enough to exonerate him. I already told you that we never find out who's responsible, so I can't say with certainty that he isn't, but I can say that the film goes out of its way to indicate that he didn't do it. The partner sets up Stansfield as being a kind of human lie detector.
I'm telling you the truth.
I hope so. Because he's got a talent for sniffing out a lie. It's scary. It's almost like a sixth sense.
Then, when Matilda's father refuses to give the information he's looking for, he asks Stansfield to check to see if he's lying about stealing the dope.
I'm sorry. He said he didn't get the dope.
After some very uncomfortable sniffing, Stansfield delivers the verdict.
Of course he didn't.
Does this prove the father's innocence? No. There's no proof. We never find out what happened with certainty. What it does do is show that the filmmakers want us to think he's innocent. What's the point of setting up Stansfield's lie detecting ability otherwise? I can't remember him ever needing it or using it or it even being mentioned again in the film. They set it up for no other reason than to have Stansfield provide his personal exoneration. It contributes nothing but confusion if the father is guilty. So, if we assume the father didn't do it, what other suspects are there? Well, what else do we know? Not much, unfortunately, but I'll give you what I got. We know the stolen dope never leaves the apartment, because one of the cops finds it hidden inside a radio in the kitchen after the massacre.
Yo! I found it!
Bingo!
This immediately limits the list of likely suspects to the residents of the apartment. We're already assuming Matilda's father is innocent, so that leaves her stepmother, sister, and Matilda herself. Oh, and her brother, who we can probably eliminate due to his age, although who knows given Matilda's existence. Obviously, I suspect she's responsible. It fits perfectly with my interpretation of her character throughout the rest of the film. As I said, I searched and searched for any evidence directly connecting her. Even just a shot of her in the kitchen, glancing over at where the radio is. I'd consider that as good as a smoking gun. I couldn't find any, nor any which would point the finger at someone else. There are a few brief shots of the radio during scenes when the police are ransacking the apartment, but they don't seem to be of any consequence. I'm afraid that's it for the hard evidence I could find, but there are a few other hints worth noting. One is just circumstantial. When Matilda returns to the apartment after the murders, she knows exactly where her father's stash of money is in the floorboards, which even the police didn't find. She doesn't have to search, she goes straight to it. If she knew where that is, there's a good chance she knew where her father hid the dope he was holding too. Additionally, I believe the cinematography also hints at her involvement. This is the shot used for almost the whole scene where Stansfield's partner is questioning her father about the dope. Look at the framing. Father on the left, partner on the right, and in between them, Matilda. In the background, out of focus, hidden from direct suspicion, but occupying the space right in the center of the screen. To me, this feels intentional, as if to indicate that she's in the middle of what's being discussed. Also, there's this.
I don't look at it, I don't touch it, I don't even know how to cut it.
Try and follow me, all right? In June, we gave you the dope. It tests 100% pure.
Did you catch it? I don't look at it, I don't touch it, I don't even know how to cut it. Then he looks directly at Matilda. Again, just an interpretation of the intent of the filmmakers. There's no evidence to suggest the father suspects Matilda is responsible. But it could be indicating to us that maybe Matilda knows something about what her father doesn't. Lastly, the transition between the partner's interrogation and Stansfield's portion of the scene is split with this close-up of Matilda. She's clearly watching, interested in what's being discussed. Lollipop in mouth, giving her best cute little girl face, something she does a few other times in the film, usually as a means to deceive and garner sympathy. I wouldn't blame you if you weren't convinced by the evidence I've provided on this subject. I recognize that it's pretty thin. But it's very compelling that this critical information, which sets in motion the entire plot of the film, is left a complete mystery, without eliminating her as one of a very small list of probable suspects. Combine that with her actions and demeanor throughout the rest of the film, and it just fits too perfectly for me not to include it as part of my personal interpretation of events. So if we assume she stole the dope, what does that mean? It means she has some direct responsibility for her family's murder. Maybe she only hoped to get her father killed, who she openly despises, with good reason. It appears she didn't intend for her brother to die at the very least, but he does, and she seems genuinely upset about that. Upset, but not remorseful. She doesn't regret her actions which led to his death, or doesn't recognize them. This parallels with her reaction when Leon is about to be killed, another character she loves. We can certainly say she had a major hand in creating the circumstances for that to take place. She reacts very similarly: sadness, sorrow, but no remorse, no guilt, or just no consideration for her own culpability. You might be wondering why I said Matilda loves Leon, when I've basically been making a case about how awful she is towards him throughout the film. It's my theory that Matilda does truly believe she's in love with Leon. She just has no concern or no ability to recognize how her actions negatively affect him. This aligns with the emotional abuse she subjects him to. People who inflict emotional abuse upon their partners often believe they're doing so out of love, even if their actions destroy the person who they claim to love so deeply. I think a better word than love is obsession. Matilda is a highly obsessive character. She sets her mind on something or someone, and she does not relent until whatever goal she has is accomplished, or whomever she targets reciprocates her affection. For me, this new interpretation of the film makes me enjoy it far more than I used to. It feels more cohesive, more consequential. Still, it alone wouldn't be enough for me to elevate the film to the level that I would call it my favorite. What got me to that point was the realization that, as far as I can tell, I may be the first person to interpret the film in this way. As I said, I read reviews, positive and negative, watched video breakdowns, browsed Reddit threads, and I couldn't find anyone with a similar take. I have picked up on subtextual narratives in films of my own before, but usually I'll have no trouble finding others who share similar interpretations. This is the only time I've ever picked up on a narrative that changes a film so dramatically, been so thoroughly convinced of its intentionality, and then been completely unable to find anyone else who noticed it. That's when it hit me. The primary theme of Leon the Professional is hiding in plain sight. Literally. All three of the film's leads rely on this. Leon is a deadly hitman who's able to survive due to his simple, unassuming external demeanor. Stansfield is the most psychotic, homicidal maniac imaginable, who's able to survive because he's a cop. Matilda is a duplicitous, vindictive, manipulative agent of chaos and destruction who's completely invisible because she's a child. And by completely invisible, I mean to everyone, the audience, the whole world. Everyone watches her say things, do things, act certain ways that, if she were an adult, we'd all immediately call her a monster. But because she's a child, we can't even see her do it. She exists exclusively in humanity's blind spot. That's why Leon the Professional is my favorite film. Because it does something I've never seen any other film do before, and I doubt I'll ever see again, or notice. It's also the reason why I can't be fully convinced that it's even a good film, because when I can't find anyone who shares my opinion on it, it becomes very difficult to be certain I'm correct. It seems impossible that so many details could come together to form what this film is by accident, but I also can't completely dismiss that it could have. If I'm wrong and the film is truly just this surface interpretation, then I honestly think it's kind of bad now. There are still good things in it, but I can't enjoy it in that way anymore. It just doesn't make sense. Upon completion of the writing, recording, and most of the editing process involved with making this video, it was brought to my attention that the version of the film I watched, and have always been familiar with, is not the version many people have seen. I mentioned in the preface that the US theatrical cut wholly removed key scenes. These include the Russian roulette scene, the restaurant laughing scene, and several others that I didn't specifically cover in this video. While this revelation does affect the conclusions I came to at the end of the video, I decided not to alter it, aside from this epilogue and the disclaimer at the beginning. My main reasoning behind this decision was that I have always watched this version of the film, even when I was younger and watched it many times, accepting it at face value. It was the extended cut. I remembered the scenes that were cut from the US version during my initial rewatch, and while the degree of their importance and impact did catch me by surprise, their presence did not. I don't know what percentage of the film's audience has only seen the shorter version. Among my personal friends who were familiar with it before I made this video, all had seen the extended cut, and I did read and watch some reviews that were clearly referencing it. Still, there are certainly many people who have only seen the shortened version, which clearly discards a big portion of the context needed to come to the conclusions I did about the film. This can, in part, explain why my interpretation seems to be so unique. Not only because the people who haven't seen the version I did would basically be incapable of viewing it in that way, but because having that version out there immediately sets the tone for conversation about the film. If everyone is saying this film is about one thing, and all versions of the film can be accepted as that thing, then it just becomes that much less likely that people will even bother looking for any alternative meaning. That said, I'm now even more convinced of the intentionality of this narrative. One thing I could never wrap my head around before realizing what was cut from the US version was that the actors and filmmakers never seemed to even drop any hints about people missing the point or that there could be an alternative reading. That's one of the main reasons I still had some consideration for the possibility that this could just be some big, misguided accident of a movie. But now it makes so much more sense. The interviews with the cast and crew are pretty much exclusively marketing material for the film, and they're marketing both versions. If they need to sell a version which effectively eliminates the context needed for this interpretation, then there isn't really any point to even acknowledging its existence. And so, I believe that's how the real version of Leon the Professional was buried. Again, hidden in plain sight from its own audience. It's been out there for decades. It never got a wide theatrical release in the US, but it did internationally, and the extended cut quickly made its way to videotapes, discs, and later streaming services worldwide. It turned out that its own release only added to the effectiveness of its obfuscation. So while I may have initially overstated the brilliance of this film's intended deception, I still think it's wonderful, unique, and special, and felt my personal journey with it was worth sharing. Thank you for watching.